Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast. And as you know, each week I get to talk to CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies and organizations, from YPO to EO, Activation Blizzard, Lending Tree, FreshBooks, Open Table, Act Software, and many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help to connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And I want to give a shout out to my business partner, Dr. Jeremy Weiss, host of the Inspired Insider podcast, who's been good friends with our guest this week and talk to him all the time, but I don't get to talk to him as frequently as he does. So that's why I decided to invite him on the podcast. He's also got a wealth of entrepreneurial experience. He's been in a lot of different types of businesses. So it'll be fun to dive into his story. But his name is Steve Gumm. He's a serial entrepreneur since the start of his career, which means he's partially insane and he's also a glutton for punishment. It says that in his official bio. He's worked with brands like Sony, Life is Good, Harry Caray's Survivor Show, and he's been a marketing and brand consultant. He's also currently on a mission to build the most creative, inspiring, effective outbound sales and lead generation agency, Gummio. Is that how you say it? Gummio. Gummio. Okay, last name. It's a play on the last name. So glad to have him here. First, before we get into that conversation, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media, which helps B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. You're listening to a podcast right now, and so therefore you should also have your own podcast. It's not enough to just listen, consume them, but you should have your own as well. It's one of the best things that I've done, both for me personally and professionally. I continue to enjoy it, and I continue to do it even though I have 4 kids at home, because I know it's the highest and best use of my time. So you want to learn more about why it can be the highest and best use of your time, go to rise25media.com, or you can email us at support@rise25media.com. All right. So Steve, excited to have you here, my friend. We've worked together, collaborated on various different projects over the years, but I've never had an opportunity to dive into your backstory and learn more about it. We were just unpacking that before this episode. And, you've been an entrepreneurial from the get-go. You had a painting business shortly after college, and you've had a number of businesses since then. I'm always curious, people who graduate from college and then go and start a business. I had no business. If I'd started a business at age 22, I would have been bankrupt probably within 6 months. So how did you start a painting business shortly after college or during college?
Man, I'll never forget it, right? So I was doing painting work. I was just basically a laborer, right, for a guy in Chicago. And I literally I was assigned to a house, whatever, they deploy you in the morning. And I went out and we finished this project, and I was a foreman, which is hilarious, as young as I was. But I was a foreman.
This is while you're also getting a bachelor's in marketing at the same time? You're just paying the bills, I guess.
True, yeah, and paying the bills, yeah. But I'll never forget, I went to the guy's door to sign off, and he was an NFL player. I don't remember who he was, but at any rate, he had a fence on there on the contract that we did not do. And it was for, a good buck. It was more than I was making in a couple of weeks. And I just asked him, why aren't we doing the fence? And he said it was too expensive. And so I was like, I'll do it for half of that. And that was more than I was making in, a couple of weeks. It was nuts. So I went out there on the weekend, took me 2 days to knock it out. And that was a wrap. I called my buddy, who I mentioned to you earlier, who still runs that paint company out of Elgin, Illinois, Precision Painting. Go ahead and hire him. But from that day forward, I left there that weekend. We pulled together some money, got a real crappy little van, printed off some flyers, and man, we ran that thing for years. And like I said, he's still running that company to this day. It's been over, 25 years.
And it's sometimes can be a tough transition. That's what the book E-Myth is all about, is about going from being someone who's good at your craft to going and getting clients and customers and stuff like that. So do you remember in those early days how you went from being the guy who's foreman or painting to getting your first customers?
Man, we did well. The customers were actually pretty easy. I think that the marketing helped because we knew what was out there, and I was a firm believer that two young college guys who were fairly clean cut, the areas that we were marketing to were on purpose luxury cedar sided home areas, right? Because you could camp out for a week on a house, and so it was pretty easy for us to get work, actually. I mean, people would leave keys and go on vacation, while we did our work. So that wasn't the big problem. The big problem was scaling that, to your point, managing people, hiring, training, insurance. As soon as you get in the weeds on all that, it didn't take us long to realize that we were spending the majority of our time, managing people as opposed to doing the work. And to be frank, we weren't very good at it. I can remember a point where we had, I'll get the math wrong, but there was like 7 guys working for us, and we were making more money on our own. It was because all the costs, and then of course we weren't actually working, so it was less efficient. So it took a long time to kind of figure that out. And there's people that are super talented at that. That's not really my shtick. I still to this day don't like it, but it's essential if you're going to scale a business. I mean, you guys know that. I mean, a big part of what, I talked to Jeremy about a lot is just offloading the stuff that, is kind of in the way of actually scaling the business.
Right. That can be a real challenge for many. And that's why a lot of scaling entrepreneurs struggle with hiring, taking these things off these plates. It's that nightmare scenario that you just explained, like going from making less when you employ 7 people than you did when you employed no one. That's kind of crazy. So you end up going from that into a mailing business, right? A mailer business. Explain what that was.
Yeah, man. So I had been, I'm like any entrepreneur, right? I mean, the ideas are always brewing. And when you're young without kids, especially, I was just like, man, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And so, I went ahead and decided to launch a direct mail business, competing with, coupon mailers and stuff like that. And, I was joking with you earlier, John, the idea was we would get this thing really big, and we got it to about 250,000 houses in the Chicagoland area. It was a good business, but the margins are very low in the direct mail print game. And then we were going to open a Jimmy John's and then have free advertising for ourselves, which is funny. But one of my clients at the time reached out and was like, hey, can you guys get me, I think it was logoed pens or something. And I was like, I'll look into it. I'd never heard of it before. Started dabbling around. I found the industries, how that's wholesaled. And as soon as I figured out what that whole world was like and the margins in that business, man, we were like, okay, let's tail this direct mail and go all in. And that's where, we started a company called 18 Stories and grew that into the mid 7 figures. For years, man. We had some amazing clients. We caught that whole microbrewery wave when it took off. I'm dating myself now, but 04, 05. And so we were producing headwear. We started a hat business called Hat Head, which was crazy. And we were doing really well. It was a lot of fun.
And now you started this business in September of 2001, shortly before 9/11. Tell us that story.
Yeah, man, it was crazy. I remember vividly, launching our first direct mail campaign. We started advertising, reach out to local business, but at the time, for us, it was a lot of money, and it was a direct mailer. I remember it was a bulk mailer, there's stuff in it. And we sent that out, got back to the office. We're like, man, what's up? And I'll never forget, my mom called, did you turn on the TV? And we launched that direct mail campaign on September 11th.
Wow.
And the rest is history. It was terrible, terrible time, crazy.
Probably people were probably offended. They probably thought, I think a lot of times after something like that happens, they think like you're doing it, and even though you didn't know. Yeah. It
was bonkers. I think we were too young and too naive to really even, think too much about it. It was just like, okay, this is going to be a little bit of a harder road than we thought.
Yeah.
And it was, but again, we weren't. When you're young with no real obligations, it's much easier to weather that storm, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
So I don't really remember feeling the pinch financially or anything during that time. I knew we weren't going to be taking off as fast as I intended, but it was just much slower going because of what was happening, in the country and economically. But we still kind of just muscled it through, man, and we grew that thing into a really nice business.
Now, you said with the painting business, one of the challenges was supervising, hiring, training, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. How did you overcome or compensate for those challenges with this business?
I really never did. If I'm being honest with you, like I was never really good at it. My business partner, fortunately, was smarter than me. He was a chemical engineer by trade, really, really bright guy. And we balanced each other out, and even then when I had to manage or bring people new into it, my attention span and my ability to do that, it's not my strong suit, and we made a lot of mistakes, definitely with regard to like compensation. The way we were structuring sales compensation for our sales teams was really poorly done in retrospect, but you make those mistakes and
poor in what way? Do you remember what the challenges were? Do you remember, like, did you overcompensate the sales team, undercompensate them? Were they not motivated? What was the?
Well, it was right at the time, so the internet was really starting to take off at the time, and the whole concept of inbound marketing was a big thing. And being a content guy, I loved it. And so what was happening is we were paying our sales teams as if they were hunters, out there bringing it in. And what we were actually doing is we were bringing it in. Usually it was me or, something digital. And then we would just like, hey, take care of John, here's the account. But we were paying them way too much, to actually have that relationship. And so once you kind of let that out of the box, it's very hard to reel it back in,
Right.
I can remember having meetings this day where I was like, we need to rethink this. And of course, when you're an employee, you think that your boss is super rich and they're balling. They don't understand the economics of it. And so it became a challenge that we honestly never really solved. I mean, we just always overpaid. Fortunately for us, there was enough to go around.
Yeah. So at some point in this period of time, we're talking 2006, 7, 8, sometime along there, you decided to go all in on real estate. Now, tell me exactly what you did. You're buying apartment buildings, you're buying single family residence. What are you buying? Because this time period, actually, 08, 09, I graduated from law school in 2007, and then 08, 09, I'm working for a real estate law firm that has a bunch of real estate investors. And much of my time at that time was actually advising people that had real estate that was totally underwater, like way underwater. So we can reminisce.
Oh, man. So my brother-in-law, I love him to this day. He's a great guy. So I don't want to, throw him under the bus here. But, he was in construction, remodeling, stuff like that. And he had a great concept. Actually, on paper, it was brilliant, right? We were going to build developments in Valparaiso, which the proximity to Chicago, for those of you that know the geography out here, a lot of people at that time were actually moving to Valparaiso because they could still work in the city, but they had the taxes and the living expenses are exponentially less in Indiana. So anyway, I was doing very well for myself at the time, and basically, I was backing everything. I didn't know what I was doing, but I know I felt like a badass being able to tell people, like, I'm in real estate, we're developing this whole community. And, I was like, I felt like the man. I can remember going to these things, what an idiot, in retrospect. But so, as soon as the storm hit, when things hit, you got to keep in mind, like, we were building a legitimate community with $300,000, $350,000 houses. And I think when the shit hit the fan, we were sitting on like 14 of these houses that were up. And
up for sale.
A bunch of lots.
They were built already and they were ready to sell? Or
they were built, yep.
Okay.
And then we had several others that were halfway up.
Okay.
And dude, we paid for those mortgages, taxes, everything we tried to pull that thing together for over 2 years.
Wow.
Like,
so it was just
every month.
It was just a slog. It was just a slog of trying to sell them. Okay.
We couldn't, like you said, like we would sell them and, let's say that during the good times we would sell a property for $340, right? We would be willing to get rid of that for like $170 at the time. Like whatever we had to do to loosen up the cash. It was insane. And so, long story short, yeah, I mean, I ended up going bankrupt through all that, and it was definitely a wake up call. You know, definitely an ego shot, but I think something that I don't know if I would change it. I definitely wouldn't want to go through it again, but I don't know. In a weird way, it turned me into a better person.
Yeah. Did you so what was it like? Is like every month you're just kind of like being like, we're just going to cover this and hopefully it's going to turn around?
Exactly. Yeah. Month after month. And so, you know, I literally was just watching, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, especially when you're young, age is very, you know, relative. Like when you turn 30, you think you're old. Then you turn 40, you think you're old. So back then, I mean, it was like, man, it felt like I had worked a lifetime. And it's funny because before I did that real estate development, I literally was going to do that development and then open up a sandwich shop in Huntington Beach, California, and just call it a day, you know. And it didn't quite go that way, you know. But
what is it with you and the sandwich shops? It seems like that's
I don't know.
The goal for you.
It keeps coming up. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. I went out to Huntington Beach. I looked at locations. I mean, I was dead set. And then you wake up one day and it was all gone and then some. And I mean, it took me. I definitely, you know, if I'm just being fully honest with you, you know, I had a good pity party for, I would call it 2 years, man, where I was like really feeling sorry for myself, you know. And then eventually it was like, I can't do this anymore. I got to get back on the horse and do something. But that shot to both the finances, the ego, you know, the business that I had to sell. Yeah, man, I was.
So you had to sell 18 stories at some point along the way as well. And you did that. Yeah. Did you do that because you were going to lose it in the bankruptcy? Did you do it because you needed to liquidate and come up with money?
To liquidate.
Yeah.
Yep. And I don't know if I was even thinking clearly. You know, we had another business that was tied into it called Hat Head. Which was a headwear manufacturing company. It was my favorite one. That was our baby. I loved it, man. It was so much fun. And we lumped that into it just to loosen up cash. I mean, you know, in retrospect, I know a lot more now about the process, you know, but at the time it was literally desperation, you know. I mean, I wasn't thinking clear. I wasn't sleeping. It was bad.
And if you could do it differently, or if you went back and, you know, at the beginning of that 2-year process, what would you have done differently?
Well, I mean, before it went bad, right, I would not have gone into something that I wasn't passionate about and knew very little about. Yeah. You know, the real estate game was sexy to me, and it looked good on paper. I thought I'd make a lot of money, but I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing at all. Nothing, you know. Yeah. I was just the money guy at the time. I would have never done that. And that was a good lesson. Yeah. Secondarily, you know, the peers, I was in the entrepreneurs organization at the time. And those guys quite literally saved my life, probably. You know, yeah, man, I can't say enough about those guys. Yeah, it was a tough time. But surrounding yourself with those kind of people, you know, and getting that advice, because I was a very proud person. You know, if you're familiar with EO, they have forums where like you're a tight group of like 8 guys, girls, whatever. They didn't even know, because I'd go to our meetings and I was lying, you know, like, oh no, things are great, I'm killing it, blah, blah, blah. And then one day I just broke down, and then, you know, they had so much valuable information for me, you know, both legally, financially, that it was like, man, okay, I can do this. Let's just go through this process to come out the other side and then rebuild. And that's what I did.
Yeah. What was that like, coming clean to the rest of the group, the forum?
Man, it was, I mean, we still joke about it to this day because I'm good friends with those guys, but it was just like a meltdown, like a child. I mean, literally, like, you know, probably like anybody that's been hiding something or is burdened by something, and you don't really know who to talk to, and then finally you're just like, man, I can't do it anymore. It was very difficult, but just completely relieving, you know. It was just like, man, okay, here I am. This is what it is. It felt felt good. And I think a lot of people don't have that kind of network, unfortunately, to lean on and reach out to. And it's very, very helpful when you do.
Yeah. So after you hit rock bottom and you declared bankruptcy, first of all, were you married at the time?
Yeah, married,
Yeah.
2 kids. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Real
Wow.
little. I mean, everybody was super tiny, but yeah, it was a crazy time.
Was your wife working through this time?
She went back to work,
Mm-hmm.
you know, she went back to work. I started I even went back and painted a few houses.
Really?
You definitely grow. Like I told you, I shut it down. So after I did bankruptcy, I knew I needed to detach. And so I did. I took about 1.5 years off, and then just was doing odd jobs. I went back and was painting houses for just a couple months. But, I was just trying to get active again. I told you before the interview here, I went to a flip phone, and this is,
So this is like 2012 or something like that. So the iPhone is out.
What is he doing with a flip phone? But I didn't want to be bothered. I didn't want any distractions. And so I just kind of, gave myself the space to just figure it out,
Mm-hmm.
And then, for me, fortunately, because of 18 Stories, that's what led me into consulting work, because a lot of those old clients, I reached back out. I was the ideas guy. And so I started picking up consulting work. And then since then, it's just been kind of, in a good way, ebbing and flowing, trying to find my lane. And very grateful for where I'm at.
Yeah. With this, it's always hard to sell a business when you need to sell a business. It's better to sell it when you don't need to. In retrospect on the business, how, is there anything that you would have done differently as far as how you sold the business when you sold the business? I realize your back, it seems like your back was kind of against the wall, so you didn't have too much options at that point.
No, I mean, I would have, if you have time and you're planning something like that, it's a little bit different. For us, it was a scramble of desperation, and the type of business that it was, the structure of a sale is a little unique, right? Because we weren't carrying contracts except for on the headwear side of the business. Mm. So on the bulk of the revenue, we had relationships, we had agency, it was amazing, right? But the risk to a buyer was, okay, if Steve and the team go away, are they still going to work with us, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really stacked in a situation where they give very little money up front, which, was minimal. And then you basically get a percentage of the sales over, I think it was like a 3 or 4 year period, just to kind of give them that that assurance that the business, the revenue numbers that they were buying, would not disappear. So
and
I'll be honest, I didn't even care. They could have probably offered us. I mean, I don't know. I look back and think I just wanted to be clean of everything to restart. So I was not in like deal maker mode where I was like, let's just get rid of this, get the cash that we can get. We'll make whoever whole, and let's move on. It was crazy.
Yeah. And so then tell me about, Gummio and how that kind of came to fruition in 2014.
Yeah, so that was just kind of like an evolution of it all. It started off heavily on the consulting side. And then if you're done consulting work, you realize very quickly that, it's great work because you get to go in and tell people what to do and leave. But I was one where it would bother me when they wouldn't execute after the fact. And so then we started, dabbling in the execution side of it, creating content for our clients, actually executing on some outbound campaigns, direct mail, email, obviously LinkedIn. And so, as that evolved, things kept moving. Because I knew it was a problem. Like it was an issue for me, even in my businesses, where I was a pretty good sales guy. You had a team, but we never really had like an engine that was just running because everyone, even my sales guys, were doing way too much, administrative work, whether it was putting proposals together or dealing with clients or whatever. So you figure out real quick, companies that do want to scale and grow, very rarely do they have an engine that is consistently, driving new leads and putting people in conversations on a daily basis, And so that's really where Gummio kind of slides in there and supports those sales organizations so that, the sales teams are more inclined to be in valuable conversations as opposed to, doing a lot of that front end busy work that is required to bring those prospects, into a conversation.
And so we're recording this in September of 2020. It's about 6 months into the whole global pandemic. What is working now in light of the changes that have happened in the world?
For me or for clients? I mean,
both.
I guess both. It
both.
Fits the bill.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting. It's been good. Like for me as a business, it's been great because I don't want to take advantage of the pandemic, right? But a lot of companies are scaling back their resources, so it's easier and actually, the economics make sense to hire a team like mine as opposed to go and try to go through the hiring process and do it in-house. So that I've been very fortunate. In terms of the actual execution of it and driving new business, for a lot of the clients, it's really good because it's consistent. But I will say, what is working now for the companies that I'm fortunate to be working with is building the foundation now for when things do kind of open up. So what I mean by that is what we're doing for them, they're getting those short-term wins, which is great because we're able to keep them very, very consistent. But I remind them all the time, and you guys are very familiar with all of this, John, like on LinkedIn or email, when you get into a conversation, right? And even if someone says, no, John, not right now, but reach out in a month, or we're restructured, whatever it is, you have a choice right there as an organization to basically ignore that and rinse, repeat, and try to chase it down in 2 years, or keep that relationship and that dialogue going so that when they do find their spot or the company loosens up, you have this foundation of relationships built that is extremely, extremely valuable. And I've seen that happen during good times. And I think right now the companies that understand, as hard as it is, like it may not necessarily be about the close right now as much as it is about building those strong relationships. And when you get the closes and you get the business, everyone celebrate. Awesome, right? We want those wins, but let's not take our eye, off of the reality that this is a time where human beings are being human beings. And I think, when you're reaching out, you need to do it in a much more authentic way that says, how can I help you? Not in a stealthy, how can I help you? I want to close a deal. Like really, how can I help you? And if that means I can help you by selling you something, or you're in a position to grow, or whatever market you're in, you want to scale faster and you have the economics to do that, awesome. If that means, you just want to bounce some ideas off for free for 30 minutes, I do it now, and I recommend all my clients, like, invest in those relationships now because, man, is it needed.
That's a harder explanation to clients, isn't it? Right? Especially if the clients are looking for sales now.
Well, what's fortunate for me is like if it's a new client, like no matter what, like the pace that I move them at is better anyway. You know what I'm saying? Like, so they're going to see that uptick just because we move things along so much faster than they were doing on their own. So like I have the benefit of knowing that they're going to see wins, you know? But I do, like I told you earlier, like I'm probably a terrible salesman right now because I'm very, very honest with my clients and prospects, you know, and I paint the darkest picture that I can just because the relationship works well that, you know, for me to be able to over deliver. So when I'm talking to prospects or customer, I let them know, look, whether you're using me or not, you know, be very aware of the people that you're touching, how you're touching them, the value that you're providing, and make sure you're building a foundation for the future. You know, whether the future means a month, 3 months, 12 months, like don't get so gung-ho on, we need to close a deal today, that you take your eye off of this opportunity where real decision makers are accessible right now, you know, and they need help. Yeah. And so I think the companies that realize that are going to, not only are they going to get short-term wins, but I think they're going to win in a major, major way once things loosen up.
That's good advice. So we're almost out of time, but I want to wrap things up with the question I always ask, which is, Steve, let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars or the Emmys. You're receiving an award for lifetime achievement for everything you've done up until this point. And what we all want to know is, in addition to family and friends, of course, who do we thank? Who are the business partners? Who are the brothers-in-law? Who are the mentors, the coaches? Who are the people that you acknowledge?
That's an easy one for me. You know, obviously the dad was a huge influence on my life, so he would be number one. You know, my mom and dad, they're great people. So they'd be number one. Two, without naming names, you know, the entire crew over there, Entrepreneurs Organization, I can never say enough about my particular team over there. Like I said, they quite literally saved my life, and I will forever be indebted to those guys. You know, and I think, you know, I would also think that the people that, you know, taught me the hard lessons, you know, that kind of shit on me when I was down. And because it creates a level of empathy that I think has turned me into a much better human being, you know, both now and in my future. So yeah, no regrets, man. Crazy ride. But I think everybody's been a part of it, dude.
Steve, where can people... Sorry, go ahead.
Can't go without Rise 25. I owe all of it to Rise 25.
I don't know about that, but it's been great collaborating with you. Gummio.com, is that the website? Where's the website? Where can people go learn more about you?
GUMMIO.com. That's the easiest place. I'm fortunate to have kind of an odd name, so if you search for me for LinkedIn, Facebook, anything, I'm pretty easy to find.
Cool. All right. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
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 And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.